Those people are not me feeling condemned for crimes they didn't commit. Some Muslims changed their names and clothing to conceal their identities, while others clung even tighter to their faith. A few became outspoken advocates for the community. Every Muslim in America has a story to tell. Here are some of them. RommanRuwa Romman, 28, is a Palestinian American community organizer and policy analyst living in Duluth, Georgia. When the terrorists attacked, she was 8 years old and had just recently immigrated to the U.S. with her parents. But the dream she had of building a new life in America quickly turned into a nightmare. Still, she recalls the long list of insults hurled at her as a child, terrorist and Sandin. Some even asked if she was related to Osama bin Laden, the Al-Qaeda mastermind behind the attacks. The bullying and harassment set Romman on a path to educate and advocate for her community, even at a young age. I felt this sense of duty to never respond to every terrible comment made to me and instead try to educate people, Romman said. Looking back at my younger self, I'm so angry and sad for her. I didn't have to do any of that. I was a kid trying to grow up and figure out my life. All of a sudden I'd become an ambassador for 1 billion people around the world. I remember trying so hard to get people to just see me as a person, she added. I stubbornly ignored the reality in front of me that my community was being systemically targeted from airports to universities to mosques. It wasn't until I was around 18 that I began to learn about government entrapment, surveillance of students in Muslim student associations, and so much more. In 2016, Romman joined the Council on American-Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, as their communications director. She's since become a community organizer, policy analyst, and consultant working on related issues. Romman says advocating for U.S. Muslims and the issues they face is daunting, but sees hope in every small victory. We will continue to be politically engaged and unapologetically so, Romman said. Muslims are no longer willing to carry that burden. None of us committed 9/11. Why should we carry that burden? Qasim Rashid, 39, is a Pakistani American human rights lawyer living in Stafford, Virginia. He remembers standing with co-workers in front of the office TV watching the World Trade Center collapse. Like the others, he was shocked by the news, but then he overheard a colleague whisper "ragheads" in fear set in. Random police stops became his norm. Racial slurs that once felt so jarring eventually became predictable. And anytime Rashid met someone new, he braced for when they would inevitably bring up 9/11. Whether I liked it or not, just by existing I was suddenly representing 1.6 billion Muslims, Rashid said. I knew if I didn't take an active role in writing my narrative, my story, someone else is going to do it for me and it's not going to be true. He channeled his desire for truth and justice into studying law, and now works as a human rights lawyer representing Muslims, among other marginalized communities. There have been immense atrocities and horrific violence committed against Muslims because of 9/11. We saw things like the Patriot Act, the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq, and Guantanamo Bay and the indefinite detention of people without due process of law, Rashid said. I knew I had to do something to create the kind of country I thought America should be, one based on justice and compassion, he added. Becoming a lawyer was an acknowledgement that this country has noble values of equal justice and protection and a constitution worth fighting for. Much of Rashid's work has centered on issues of immigration, asylum, and women's rights. Fighting for justice in the court system hasn't been easy, he said, but he's heartened by the next generation, which has become increasingly vocal about rights issues and intolerant of hate. As for young Muslims, he offers these words of advice: be fierce and be courageous in your identity. You don't need to be ashamed or shy about it. Embrace it fully and confidently, and do so while leading with justice and creating an inclusive world for all voices. Nakedbur Rahman, 44, is a Bangladeshi American university professor living in Fayetteville, North Carolina. His loved ones were found safe, but the fear and panic he felt remain with him to this day. If I close my eyes, it's like I'm watching a movie, Rahman said. I can see exactly what happened from the moment I woke up to the moment I saw the attack on TV. After that, it was like my life stopped and I couldn't remember anything. Rahman said he was fortunate to receive loads of support from his community in Maine, where he was in graduate school at the time. Still, he thought twice about doing or saying anything that could be misconstrued as suspicious. I was lucky to be surrounded by kindness, but something would always bring me back to reality, he said. I was constantly reminded of the same question: am I going to be subject to backlash because a Muslim group committed this? It made me sad and very careful. His fears were bolstered by frequent news reports of hate crimes targeting Muslims. He said it led to a terrifying realization for the Muslim community that ultimately brought them together. The Muslim community learned that the things we cherish most in this country, the First Amendment, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, could be taken away from us in a second, Romman said. We came together because of that. For decades, Muslims have lived in the shadow of 9/11, but Romman believes the future won't be as dark. Muslim organizations we see today that are flourishing were born after September 11th, when we realized that if we don't start helping ourselves, be active in the community, tell our sides of the story, no one else is going to do it for us, he said. And we refuse to be made the scapegoats forever. Ashanti Jabri, 27, is a data analyst and martial artist living in Atlanta, Georgia. Jabri says he always felt like an outsider in the South. Being both black and Muslim, he was taught to be wary of racism and Islamophobia from a very young age. But Jabri didn't really understand what that meant until the morning of the attacks. He was outside playing with his brother and some neighborhood kids when the news broke. His parents explained what happened, before telling their children that even though they hadn't done anything wrong, their lives would be forever changed. Jabri was told that he was no longer allowed to play or be outside alone. For a year, his mother took off her hijab and his father stopped wearing a kufi, a traditional cap worn by some Muslim men.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.